Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, which is Shabbos Daf Kuf Lamed. Our Mishnah is going to be a continuation, a hemshech of the previous Mishnah, which told us that bris milah is done even on Shabbos, even though it involves a malacha. Now, of course, we're speaking about a bris milah which is taking place at its appointed time on the 8th day. Now, what about the preparations for the bris milah, which perhaps involved a malacha as well? Can he do that on Shabbos? Says the Mishnah, Reb Lezer Omer, yes, even hachana, even the machshirei mitzvah can be done on Shabbos. Reb Lezer Omer lehevi kli me'erev Shabbos. If he had not yet brought the kli, the knife for the bris milah, in Gemara terms, it's called the izmel of the milah, the milah knife. If he hadn't yet brought the kli from before Shabbos, meviyai b'Shabbos, he can bring it even on Shabbos through Rosh Hashanah. Because according to him, even the preparations are considered to be on the same level as the mitzvah, and just as the mitzvah itself is doicha Shabbos, pushes away Shabbos, likewise the machshirei mitzvah, those things required for the preparation of the mitzvah, they also have the power to be doicha Shabbos. So he brings the kli through Rosh Hashanah, and he brings it megula, revealed, uncovered. The Gemara will explain why it is necessary to do that. Ubis sakana, however, in times of danger, when there's a gzeira against doing bris milah, so he needs to cover it, mechaseyu, he conceals it, al pi edim, so he does it in the presence of two witnesses who will be able to spread the word that he's actually hiding a milah knife there. It's a mitzvah, and this will deflect any possible suspicion, chashad, that perhaps he's carrying something inappropriate. V'oid amar Reb Lezer. In addition to this, says Reb Lezer, kursim, eitzim, one can even chop wood, lases bechamin, to fashion coals, lases kli barzel, to form this metal knife for the bris milah. So that far, you can actually do this, the cutting of the wood, and etc., to prepare for the bris milah and do it on Shabbos. This is the shita of Reb Lezer. Rabbi Akiva disagrees. He holds that the only thing that is actually doicha Shabbos, that pushes away Shabbos, is the bris itself, is the mitzvah itself, but not the preparations. Klal Omer Rabbi Akiva set down a rule. Kol malacha she'efshar la'asos erev Shabbos, any malacha which can theoretically be performed erev Shabbos, for instance, bringing of the knife, forming the knife, eina doiches haShabbos. That is not doiches Shabbos. Umila she'efshar la'asos erev Shabbos. In contrast to the bris milah itself, which certainly cannot be done on erev Shabbos, that is doiches haShabbos. So apparently, according to Rabbi Akiva, only the actual mitzvah is considered to be the cheftza of the mitzvah, the integral part of the mitzvah, but the preparations, that's his personal preparations. That's not an integral part of the mitzvah. That he must make sure to do on erev Shabbos. Whereas according to Reb Lezer, even the hachana, the hechsher of the mitzvah, is regarded as connected, subordinate to the mitzvah itself. It's an integral part of the actual mitzvah, and therefore, according to Reb Lezer, if he needs to, he can do those on Shabbos as well. Getting back to the beginning of the Mishnah, where Reb Lezer tells us he carries the knife, megula, revealed in Rosh Hashanah. What is the reason for that? Iboilu, so the question was asked, time with Reb Lezer, is the reason that Reb Lezer tells us to have it megula because mishum chayvuva mitzvah, to express his love, his endearment for this mitzvah, that he's demonstrating to all, look, what a special mitzvah that I'm going to be mechal Shabbos for it. So that's why he's meant to leave the knife revealed and exposed. Oidilmo, perhaps, mishum chashada. It's meant simply to deflect suspicion. Therefore, he's meant to keep it open so all can see that he's carrying for the sake of a mitzvah. They shouldn't suspect that he's doing something inappropriate. What is the difference between both svaris, between both reasons? L'may nafkamina. What is the ramification here? La suyay mechusa al pi edim. The question is, can he bring it mechusa, covered, al pi edim? If he did in the presence of edim, so that would be the nafkamina between both approaches. I amers mishum chivuva mitzvah. If the reason why he's meant to leave it revealed and exposed is to express the chavivas ha-mitzvah, then there's no point in covering it in front of Edom. Megula in, then he could only bring it when it's exposed. But mechus aloi, but covered, he can't. Elei amas mishum chashada. If the reason why he's meant to have the knife exposed is to deflect suspicion, so in this case, afilu mechusana shaper dami, even in this case when he covers it, but if he's doing it in front of Edom, and they can go out and testify and spread the word that you know what he has there, it's a milah knife, he's not simply carrying something, a random object. Therefore, that takes care of the problem. So he's allowed to do it when it is covered. What is the halacha? What is the conclusion? Itma, we learned. Omer Reb Levi, loy Omer Reb Lezer. The only reason why Reb Lezer instructed him to carry it exposed, ela l'chavuvei mitzvah, to express his love for the mitzvah, that the mitzvah is dear to him. Therefore, there's no accomplishment in doing it in front of Edom. So the point here is to keep it exposed, so all will see that he is being machav of the mitzvah. So he's meant to do it strictly in that manner. Tani Mehachi, we learned likewise in the Brisa, Mevia Megula, he brings a knife exposed, ve'ein Mevia Mechusa, but not covered, Divei Reb Lezer. So the fact that the Brisa expresses it in very strict terms, you can bring it exposed but not covered. Apparently the Brisa is coming to teach us that this is the one and only way to transport this knife. He's not meant to cover it, even if he doesn't before Edom, because the point here is to express his chavivas hamitzvah. Therefore, it is meant to be strictly exposed. Amar Vashi masnisin namideka. Our Mishnah as well will indicate likewise. Diktani, because you can make a diik as follows. The Mishnah says, "B'shas hasakon," in a time of danger, mechasei pi Edom. He covers the knife in the presence of Edom. Apparently, this is an allowance strictly for a time of danger. B'sakana in, only during a sakana. B'shloi b'sakana loy, but otherwise not. Shma mina, apparently we hear from here, mishum chivuva mitzvah, shma mina. Apparently, the reason is to demonstrate his chavivas, his endearment of this mitzvah, that he's being machal Shabbos for it. So he's meant to keep it exposed in all situations, unless it's a time of danger. Tani idach, we learned in another brayso, Mevia Megula, he brings a knife through Shisarabim, Megula exposed, ve'ein Mevia Mechusa, and not covered, Div Reb Lezer. Rabbi Yudah, Ayman B'Shur Reb Lezer, Noyhagin Nahayu B'Shas HaSakana. We were noyeg, it was customary for us during the Shas HaSakana, that we made exception. Shemeviin Mechusa, we would bring it covered up, Api Edom, which was covered up in the presence of Edom, in which case there would be no concern of chashad, that he's carrying something inappropriate, but otherwise we would strictly do it megula exposed. Iboilu. So the question was asked. We spoke about shas hasakana, then there's an allowance to actually cover over and conceal the knife, but make sure that you do it in front of Edom. The question is, how many witnesses are required? Edom the ka'amar, when we use the term Edom, which is a plural term, iu v'chad, does it mean that it's him plus an additional person, meaning that he is part of the calculation. So you need the person himself who's carrying it plus another person for a total of two. Dilma, or perhaps hu vitrei, in addition to the person carrying it, you need two other Edom to watch him conceal it. So you need two Edom. Now the point here is that a person is not considered to be a kosher witness, a qualified witness, an aid, when it pertains to something which he's nagea to. So something personal, a person cannot testify about. So here we're speaking about Edom, two Edom. The person himself who's carrying it, generally speaking, cannot testify with regard to something that pertains to him himself. So he's not considered to be a kosher aid. So the question here is, do we need two independent witnesses aside from him, or can he be included in the number two? Tashma, come and listen to the raya. Ubesakana, the Mishnah says, during a sakana mechasei pi Edom, he covers it in the presence of Edom. So the term here is Edom, a plural term. So it's all good and well if you say that in addition to him you need another two witnesses. Now we understand why, how the Mishnah calls them Edom, because they are considered to be qualified witnesses, as opposed to he himself, who's not qualified to testify about something that pertains to himself. So Bishleim hu v'trei shaper, then it works well. Ela i'amas, but if you suggest hu v'chad, that he is taken into account, it's all you need is him plus another person for a total of two. My Edom. What does the Mishnah mean when it says Edom, which implies that we need two qualified witnesses? He's not a qualified witness when it comes to something that he's involved in. Says the Gemara, we don't need qualified witnesses. It simply means, my Edom, we need two people that theoretically, potentially can testify in a court of law. They have the koyach, they have the power to testify. But we're not speaking about going to a bezdin here. There's no din going on here. The point here, as Rashi explains, is simply to spread the word, to notify and to avoid, to avert possible suspicion that he's carrying something inappropriate. So there's no need to have halachically qualified witnesses. So certainly, even when the Mishnah uses the term Edom, we're taking him into account as well. It's him plus another person for a total of two people who know what's going on, who are aware of the facts, and can spread the word. So in summary, we learned about Bris Milah, which is Deichas HaShabbos, according to Rabbi Kiva, only the Milah itself, but not the preparations for the Milah. According to Rabbi Lezer, even the preparations. For instance, transporting the knife through Rishus HaRabim, and as Rabbi Lezer says, it needs to be Megula, and the Gemara concluded the reason is Mishum Chivuva Mitzvah, to express the endearment for this mitzvah, to show that he's willing to be Machal Shabbos for it, and except for B'Shas HaSakana, during time of danger, he would cover it in front of Edom. And not only this, Rabbi Lezer says he can even go ahead and fashion the kli, can chop wood and make coals to go ahead and form the kli, the Sakan Shemila, which is mutter even on Shabbos. Continues the Gemara, V'oidam Rabbi Lezer, Tana Rabban b'mkaimay Rabbi Lezer. In the location, the locale of Rabbi Lezer, Hayukursin Eitzim, they would follow his view. They would actually chop wood, lasis becham, to form charcoals, lasis barzel b'Shabbos, to go ahead and create this barzel, this knife, this Milah knife on Shabbos. So they followed his opinion. Although, generally speaking, we don't follow Rabbi Lezer's opinion, but in his location, apparently they followed his halacha. And the Mepharshim speak out that apparently it was prior to the conclusion of the greater Bezdin, which ruled in accordance with the Chachamim. Therefore, at that point in time, they would still follow his opinion in his location. In the locale of Rabbi Glili, they would eat basar oif b'chalav. They would eat the meat of oif, of a bird, of fowl, b'chalav, with milk. So this is a shita of Rabbi Glili, who says there's no isser of mixing milk and meat together when the meat is non-animal meat. It's oif meat. As we'll see soon, the Gemara will explain the drasha, the basis for this shita. So you have two chidushim. In the place of Rabbi Lezer, they would actually do the machshir mitzvah even on Shabbos. In the place of Rabbi Glili, they would mix the basar of oif with chalav. Says the Gemara story, Levi ikla lebei Yosef Rishba. So Levi visited the home of Yosef Rishba, the bird trapper. Krivulei reisha the tavza bechelva. They served him a head of a tavsa. It's translated as a peacock. Bechelva with in milk. So this was basar oif b'chalav. Lo yachal. So he refused to eat. Ki asal kamei the Rebbe. When Levi came before Rebbe, and he related to him this incident, Amalei, so Rebbe told him, why don't you excommunicate them for behaving in this manner, for mixing milk and meat together? Amalei, so Levi told him, Asrei, the Rebbe B'Seirava. So Rebbe was questioning him, why didn't you excommunicate them? Why did you let this pass? So he told him, Amalei, Asrei, the Rebbe B'Seirava. This was the locale, the place of Rebbe B'Seirava. Va'amina, and I figured Dilma Darishlu Krabei Glili. I figured perhaps he expounded them, he taught to them the halacha in accordance with Rabbi Glili's opinion, who allows mixing this type of meat with milk. This nan, as we learned, Rabbi Glili Omer Nemar lo yiseichel kol nevela. So this is one pasuk which begins by describing the Isser Nevela. Don't eat nevela, a carcass, a dead animal. And the pasuk continues, actually concludes with the words, you're not meant to cook a goat in the milk of its mother. So here we learn the Isser of Basar Chalav. We make a drush as follows. Only, why is the pasuk speaking about B'chalev Imay, its mother's milk? The pasuk is implying that the only time there's an Isser to mix meat and milk together is if this species generates milk. Esher Asar Mishum Nevela. Before we get to that point, there is a havamin here that perhaps even basar oif b'chalav will be asr. Why? Because once again the pasuk begins with lo yiseichel kol nevela and then concludes with the isser basar b'chalav. Perhaps I would say as follows: asr mishum nevela, something which is asr, which has the isser nevela pegged to it, asr lavashel b'chalav, that cannot be mixed and cooked with milk. Oif asr mishum nevela. Likewise, perhaps even oif which has isser nevela may not eat a dead oif. Perhaps there as well there would be an isser to cook the oif with chalav, because when I Torah the isser is only when you cook them together. So perhaps there as well there's an isser tamaloymar b'chalev imay. The pasuk concludes leisavashal di, where b'chalev imay, in its mother's milk. So this implies that only an animal which generates milk has this isser. Yotza, excluding oif she'ein lo chalev eim, whose mother does not produce milk. So apparently only a species which generates both things, milk and meat. We may not mix those two aspects of this creature together. But oif, which does not generate milk, there's no isser of cooking the milk and the meat together. So this is the shita of Rabbi Saglili. And indeed, Levi says, look, apparently Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira was the one who paskin like Rabbi Saglili and allowed the members of his community to conduct themselves in this manner, and therefore there was no justification for me to penalize them. Continues the Gemara, on Rabbi Yitzchak ir achas hoysa b'Eretz Yisrael, there was this city in Eretz Yisrael, shehayu oisik Rabbi Lezer. They would conduct themselves like Rabbi Lezer and prepare the bris milah even on Shabbos. For Yomesim bizmanon, and they merited on that account, as we learned earlier, doing the malachis on Shabbos as an expression of chavivus, endearment and love for the mitzvah, the commitment of love of mitzvah of bris. So these people, they would even prepare the bris, the machshirei milah, they would do on Shabbos. And this was an expression of their commitment to the bris milah. And as a result of Yomesim bizmanon, they were zeicha that they would only die at their appointed time. They wouldn't die prematurely. Not only that, ela shapam achas, there was a certain time that Gozer Malchus Arisha Gzer al Yisrael, the Malchus Arisha, which is the Roman Empire, they enacted a Gzer al Yisrael to prevent them from doing milah, ala milah. On that city, there was no Gzera enacted. They skipped over that city. Apparently, as a result of their true commitment to the mitzvah of bris milah, there was zeicha that they were spared the Gzera on bris milah. Continues the Gemara, Tanya Rab Shimon Gamliel Omer, Kol mitzvah shekiblu aleim b'simcha, any mitzvah that Klal Yisrael accepted upon themselves with joy and happiness, kigoyin milah. For instance, milah d'chsiv. Where do we find that there is joy related, connected to bris milah? D'chsiv, as it says in the pasuk in Tehillim, David HaMelech says, "Sasa noichel imrasecha." I'm joyous upon as a result of your words. Ki moitzi shel rav, as though I found great spoils. So this is referring to bris milah. Why is that? Rashi will explain for us. So this is the bris milah which we are joyous about and we accepted b'simcha. The Gemara says, as a result of that, adayin ois noisa b'simcha. Even today, we do the mitzvah of bris milah b'simcha. Rashi says, she'oisim mishta, we make a suda to celebrate the mitzvah of bris milah. V'chol mitzvah shekibul aleim b'ktata, in contrast to all mitzvahs that Klal Yisrael accepted upon themselves, but they did it b'ktata, contentiously, with quarreling, they took it upon themselves begrudgingly. Could go in arayis, like the mitzvah arayis. The chesed that says in the pasuk, "Vayishma Moshe." So Moshe heard the nation beichel mishpachosav crying. The mishpachosav, what does that mean? Al iske mishpachosav. They were crying on account of the concept of intermarrying amongst relatives, that they were prohibited, that the isser was enacted. One must marry only the appropriate person. So they accepted upon themselves with crying, was begrudgingly, was with quarreling. Even today, it is performed. It is done biktata, with quarreling. How is that? The leka ksuva. There's no ksuva. There's no marriage document which is written loiromo be'atigra, in which there's no some form of quarreling present when they sit down to make the arrangements for the wedding, the financial arrangements. So the ksuva features some sort of element of quarreling, and this is as a result of the fact that this whole concept was accepted with ketata. Let's take a look at Rashi. Explains for us the pasuk of Sasal Noichi, how it relates to milah. Rashi here is 23 lines from the bottom, beginning with the word Sasal Noichel Imrasecha. Why is this connected to milah? It says Rashi, Imrasecha is a lashon yachad, Amira Yechida, referring to that single word, that single instruction of Hashem, Shekod Malashar Amiras, which preceded the other instructions, the other words of Hashem, the other mitzvahs. Vihi milah. This is referring to bris milah, which was given to Avraham Avinu prior to the other mitzvahs. So this is the Sasanoich al Imra Secha, and I'm joyous about it. Shishol Oisin v'Sasam Aleh. They do it and they're joyous about it. Why? The Chol Shar mitzvahs. Says Rashi a remarkable thing. All other mitzvahs, they're not something which demonstrate all the time. They're not something visible all the time. You're going tefillin or mezuzah v'tzitzis because they're relatively limited mitzvahs. They're not present when he's out in the field working. He doesn't have his mezuzah there. Perhaps his tefillin. V'arim, when he's undressed, he doesn't even have his tzitzis then. But bris milah is a constant feature on a person. Avozu meid aleim le'olam. This testifies regarding our commitment to Hashem, our eternal, unbreakable bond to Hashem. It's there constantly, it's eternal. Even when we're in a Beis HaMerchas. As Rashi brings, but David, this is regarding David HaMelech himself, Shira Atzmi Beis HaMerchas. He looked at himself when he was in the Beis HaMerchas, he was distressed. He said, look, I'm missing all the mitzvahs. I'm bereft of all the mitzvahs. I don't have my tzitzis, my tefillin. His mind was at ease when he saw the milah, that it's accompanying him constantly, 24/7. So this is a source of constant joy for us that shows that our constant, uninterrupted, eternal bond with Hashem. So this was the mitzvah which Klal Yisrael relate to b'simcha, and even today we do it b'simcha. Rashi says b'simcha she'osem mishta, we make a celebration, a suda. Continues the Gemara. Tanya, we learned to Shimon Lazar Omer. Kol mitzvah shemasru Yisrael atzma leim lemisa. Any mitzvah which Klal Yisrael gave their life over for it, they were meiseh nefesh b'shas gzeres hamalchus, at the time when there was a decree and acted against it. Kigoyin avedus kechavim. Klal Yisrael was meiseh nefesh. They gave away their lives not to be over the avera of idol worship or milah. Likewise, when it comes to milah, adayin himuchzekes biyadam. It's still firm in their hands as a result of their absolute commitment and willingness to be moiser nefesh for this mitzvah. V'chol mitzvah shaloi masru Yisrael atzman aleo lemisa b'shas gzeres hamalchus. In contrast to other mitzvah, where Klal Yisrael was not willing to sacrifice themselves during the gzera of the malchus. Tefillin, adayin himrupa biyadam. It's still weak, relatively weak in their hands. Let's see why. The Amar of Yanai, tefillin tzrichen guf naki. So a tefillin require one to maintain a clean body out of respect for the tefillin, just like Elisha Bal Knafayim. We'll see the story mentioned soon, that he treated his tefillin with utmost respect. He maintained the guf naki. We're meant to follow in that manner and do likewise. But Rashi brings that the fact that he's relating to Elisha Bal Knafayim as that example of the person who did it properly, apparently not all were careful enough. Mahi, what is this guf naki that we're referring to, that one is meant to maintain when he wears his tefillin? Make sure that you don't pass wind. Rav Amar Shlayishim, you shouldn't sleep with them because that might cause them to pass wind. Now, why was this fellow given the term Elisha Bal Knafayim? Elisha, we know that was his name, but why Bal Knafayim, the man of wings? Says the Gemara, as a result of the following story, we find that indeed he demonstrated a great commitment, a great mesiras nefesh, sacrifice for the mitzvah tefillin. Shapam achas, there was a time shegazo malchus harisha, the Roman malchus decreed gzeira al Yisrael shekol hamaniach tefillin al roishay, one who places tefillin on his head, yikros meichai, they will bore out his brain, which is right underneath the place where they put the tefillin. And the Mefarshim speak out that they were particularly concerned about the tefillin shel roish, which has Hashem's name on it, which testifies to Hashem's Shekhinah resting on Klal Yisrael. It demonstrates our uniqueness and the specialty of Klal Yisrael. So they were particularly threatened by the tefillin shel roish, and they decreed that nobody should wear it. He defied that the gzeira, and he would put on his tefillin. So he put them on, went out to the marketplace. If you row kaster echad, this officer saw him. Ratz b'lefanam, Elisha took off, he ran away from him. V'ratz achrav, and the officer pursued him. Kiven sheigeh etzloi, as soon as he caught up to him, notla miroshei, so Elisha quickly removed it from his head, v'achsa b'yadai, and held it in his hand, covered it with his hands. Amalei ma b'yadcha, what's in your hand? Amalei, he told him, kan feyoina, in this hand, I actually have the wings of a dove. Pashat es yadai. So he obliged him to open his hand, and he opened his hand, v'nimtzu b'kanfiyoin. Indeed, what did they find there? They found wings of a dove. So there was a miracle done for him on account of his Mesiras Nefesh, his dedication for mitzvahs film. Lefichach, as a result of this story, they would call Elisha Baal Knafayim, the man of wings. Now, why specifically Kanfiyoina? So he needed to say something, but why do you have to say dove's wings? Maishna Kanfiyoina. There was a message here. Maishna Kanfiyoina, the Amarle, why specifically the wings of a bird? V'loy Amarle Shar Oifos, and he didn't tell him the wings of another bird. Mishum the Damya Knes Yisrael Yoina, because Klal Yisrael is compared to a dove. Shenemar Kanfiyoina, the wings of a dove, Nechva Kesef, covered with silver, Veriseb, Raka Choretz. Why is Klal Yisrael compared to a yoina? My yoina zu, just as this dove, knafeh meginas aleh, its wings protect itself, protect him from predators. As Rashi says, it doesn't ward off its predators using its beak, but rather using its knafayim. Af Yisrael, likewise, Klal Yisrael mitzvahs. The mitzvahs that we perform, meginas aleh, those mitzvahs, protect her from their enemies. So that's why he used the term kanfiyoina, to imply that it's actually the mitzvahs that protect us. So in summary, we learned that the mitzvahs that Klal Yisrael accepted upon them with simcha, like the bris milah, they still today perform that bris with simcha, in contrast to the mitzvah of arayis, which they were makal b'ktat, with quarreling and contentiousness, was accepted begrudgingly, with bechia, the pasuk says. So even today, there's some form of quarreling which takes place during the wedding arrangements. The Gemara concluded that the mitzvahs that Klal Yisrael were moise nefesh about, like Avodah Zarah and bris milah, those mitzvahs are firm in their hands, as opposed to a mitzvah which Klal Yisrael was not moise nefesh about during the time of Gzeira, such as tefillin. That mitzvah is rafi b'yadam, it is weak in their hands, meaning that not all of us do the mitzvah properly in its most preferred manner. Continues the Gemara, Omar Rab Abba bar Rav Adam Rav Yitzchak. Pamachas, there was once a time, shachachu, they forgot v'lo yehiviu izmel. They didn't bring the izmel, which is the milah knife, Meir of Shabbos. So they didn't bring it before Shabbos, they forgot. Vehiviu b'Shabbos. And they transported on Shabbos derech gagois, through rooftops, derech hatzeres, through courtyards. Shaloi b'tzayin Reb Eliezer. This was not compatible with the view of Reb Eliezer. Says, well, what do you mean? Maskef Reb Yosef. Shaloi b'tzayin Reb Eliezer? Why is this not in accordance with the view of Reb Eliezer? Adrab, just the opposite. Reb Eliezer, who is shari. Reb Eliezer is the one who allows transporting the knife even through Shus Rabbim. V'chitem, perhaps what he meant to say was Shaloi b'tzayin Reb Eliezer. It's unlike the Shita of Reb Eliezer, the shari afilu b'Shus Rabbim, who allowed even Shus Rabbim. Ela b'tzayin Rabbanon. Rather, it was compatible with the Ratzon Rabbanon. The Asru derech Shus Rabbim, that prohibited transferring the knife through Shus Rabbim. V'sharu, however, they allowed derech gagois, through rooftops, derech hatzeres, through courtyards. V'karfifa, a karfif is this enclosed, unroofed storage area. It's not a residential area; it's a storage area generally. So this knife was transferred through these non-residential areas. Now Rashi points out there was no eruv done generally to transfer from one person's rooftop to the other person's rooftop, or from one chutzah to the other. A eruv needs to be done to merge, to combine the ownership. So there was no eruv present here. So it involves Issa D'Rabbanan. So this was allowed, even though an Issa Minatayra, a Melacha of Ha'itzah through Shus Rabbim, the Rabbanan do not allow, but merely an Issa D'Rabbanan carrying through the Chatzeres, the Gagos, the Chafifos, they did allow. Says Gemara, is that the case? Really? Chacham allow bringing a milah knife through a prohibited area? Umi shari? Is that allowed? Ba'atani, we learned in the Brayso. Just like we don't bring the knife, which involves a malachim and a Torah. Likewise, we don't bring it. Gaga not through the rooftops that don't have an area with each other. Through these storage areas. Nor through courtyards. So what is the pshat in the fact that they brought the knife through the gagos and chatzeres? Shaloi b'yitzon Reb Eliezer. What do you mean shaloi b'yitzon Reb Eliezer? Reb Eliezer allows the knife to be brought through Shus Rabbim, and how can you say it's going according to Shus Rabbanan, according to the Ratzon Rabbanan, who don't allow carrying through an area which has no eruv? Says the Gemara, Ella. You know what he meant to say? Elam Ravashi Shaloi B'Ritzayin Reb Eliezer U'Machla Kasai. Indeed, he didn't mean to say that they weren't following Reb Eliezer, but following the Rabbanon. He didn't mean to say that, because even according to Rabbanon, this would be Asur. He meant to say Shaloi B'Ritzayin Reb Eliezer. It was incompatible with the will, with the Shita Reb Eliezer, who allows even to Rishus Rabbim. Apparently, they did not follow that Shita. The fact that they did not bring it to Rishus Rabbim. And it was not in accordance with the Machlek Kosim, meaning they're his disputants, meaning he's the ones that are Chaylik on Reb Eliezer, the Chachamim, because they wouldn't even allow bringing it through a place that's lacking Erev. So who then did they follow? Ela B'Ritzayin Reb Shimon. They were following the Ratzin, the view, the opinion of Reb Shimon. That's not as we learned in the Mishnah. Reb Shimon, Echad Gagois, whether we're speaking about rooftops, transferring through rooftops, V'echad Karfifois, whether we're speaking about transferring through these storage areas, V'echad Chatzeres, likewise the courtyards, Kulan Rishus Achashein. They're all regarded as one Rishus, one domain. They're all one type. They're similar areas, they're non-residential areas. So one may transfer from a rooftop to the other, from a rooftop to a courtyard, from a courtyard to a karfir, if they're all considered to be one domain. Lekelim sheshavsa b'seichem. So they're all considered to be rishus achas heim. Lekelim sheshavsa b'seichem, with regard to a utensil which rested inside them, meaning the object that was present in any of these types of areas at the onset of Shabbos. That object is classified as a non-residential object. It's sitting in a chutzner, which is a non-residential area. It's not like a person's home, which is designated for him specifically. So this object belongs to a non-residential area, a rooftop, a courtyard, a storage area. Therefore, we allow transfer of this object to all the other areas which are of similar nature. But not with regard to kalim which rested inside one's home, meaning the object which was present inside the bayis at the commencement of Shabbos, at the first point of Shabbos, that object becomes classified as a residential object, an object which is designated for very personal use within the person's home. That cannot be transferred without an Erev. Let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi here is 8 lines from the top, beginning with the words, the Snan of Shimon Aimer, Echad Gagois v'chulu kulan. All these various courtyards, rooftops, etc., even if they belong to many owners. One may transfer from one to the other. Why? This is the punchline. The Chacham did not prohibit transferring from one rishus, from one domain to the other, ella batim, only when it pertains to homes. Meaning like this. Perhaps just a quick overview, introduction of these concepts of Erev. We're going to have a synopsis of Maseches Erev in here. So we have batim, which are homes, so the individual homes, designated for personal use. The batim, the homes, are situated in courtyards. So we have a bayis and a chutzner surrounding it. The chutzner features several homes. So it's a communal area, it's a shared area, it's a common area. Then we have the chatzeris, which join into another area called Mavai. Mavai is the alleyway. Mavai means the entranceway. Mavai. Mavai v'shus harabim. So again, we have the houses, which are situated in the chatzeris, and the chatzeris, which merge, which lead into the alleyway, which are open to the alleyway, which goes into the v'shus harabim. Now, in order to carry from one to the other, from the bayis to the chatzer, the Chacham required them, meaning all the residents of this courtyard, to make an Erev Chatzeris. Why? Rashi, the Rambam, the Rishonim explain this was done as a concern that perhaps if we allow transferring from 2 types of domains, from the bayis, which is designated to Ruvain, over to the Chatzer, which is a shared area, which is a communal area, which is designated to all the residents of the courtyard. So it appears as though he's taking from Ruvain's place to Shimon's place. So perhaps, as a result, he will go and carry from Rishus Yachid to Rishus Rabbim. Therefore, the Chacham prohibited transferring from an area which is designated for a personal use, from Ruvain's home into this communal area, into this Chatzer. It appears as though he's taking something from one type of domain to the other, like a Rishus Yachid to Rishus Rabbim. So unless they make an Erev Chatzeris, one cannot transfer. The Erev Chatzeris accomplishes the following. It merges the ownership of the Chatzer. It makes them as though They're all living in one house, one happy family. It's just one designation. There's one use here. There's one dira here. There's one residence here. And therefore, there's no concern transferring from a house to the courtyard. It's all one big happy family. It's not like Ruvain's Rishus going over to Shimon's Rishus. It's all as though it's one residence, one home, one ownership, one domain. So that's the point of the Erev Chatzeres, as we're going to learn Maseches Erevin. So the Erev Chatzeres allows transferring from the bias to the Chatzer. Likewise, there's a concern regarding transferring from the Chatzer to the Mavi, which is used by more than one Chatzer. So we have two Chatzeres, two courtyards, merging into a Mavi, using this Mavi. They cannot transfer an item from the Chatzer, which is an area which is designated specifically for these homeowners, to the Mavi, which is a communal area, which is going to be used and shared by various Chatzeres. So once again, we're running into the same problem, because they're transferring from one domain, one ownership, to a different ownership. And one may confuse this with the Rishus Yachid Rishus Rabim, as mentioned earlier. Therefore, we require an Erev to be done here as well. Rashi says the Erev of the Mavi is called Shituf. Erev of the Chatzeres Mavi Kari Shituf. Shituf means partnership. So it's the same concept. They go ahead and they merge their ownership in the Mavi, and they say, well, don't look at it as though there are 5 Chatzeres coming independently to use this Mavi. Let's go ahead and merge all the Chatzeres together. It's as though there's only one Chatzer here. It's one big happy family. There's one residence. It's all one Rishus. And going forward, we don't view it as though they're taking from the Chatzer belonging to these people into the Mavi, which is shared by others. Rather, it's all considered to be one huge single domain, and there's no transferring taking place. So that's the point of Shituf Mevois. Now, according to the Rabbanan have a different approach than Reb Shimon. Rabbanan hold that in order to allow transfer from the Bayis to the Chatzer, we need an Erev Chatzeres. From the Chatzer to the Mavi, we need a Shituf Mevois. Now, this halacha pertains even to an item which was sitting in the Chatzer at the onset of Shabbos, at the beginning of Shabbos. Although this item was not in a person's private domain, it wasn't his personal home, nevertheless, we cannot transfer from a Chatzer to a Mavi unless they combine their ownership. Likewise, if a object was sitting on a person's rooftop, on a gog, he cannot transfer it to his neighbor's rooftop unless they did an Erev. Whereas Reb Shimon maintains that this whole concept of Erev or Shituf only applies to bias, as Rashi says, to bata, meaning to something which relates to one's personal use, one's residential use, an item which was designated to be used in the bias. It was present in one's home at the onset of Shabbos. That's designated for very personal use. It's sitting in a very personally designated domain. It's his home. Only that requires an Erev Chatzeres, because he's going to transfer it from his personal domain. It's an item designated for his very personal use in his privacy of his home. Take it into the Chatzer, which is a communal area. That's considered to be a transfer of domains, a shinui versus a significant shinui, a significant change and transformation. But let's say that an item was sitting out in the Chatzer, which is a non-residential area. It's not a person's private domain. It's not a mokum dira. It's not his house. So the item sitting there is not really standing to be used on a very personal level. It's not designated for his private personal use. It's sitting out in the Chatzer. It's classified as a non-residential object. According to Reb Shimon, there's no concern transferring this object throughout all these areas which are non-residential areas, the Chatzeros, the Karfifos, the Gagin. As long as you don't get a bias involved, there's no need for an Erev, there's no need for a Shituf. So that's the Mishnah. Reb Shimon tells us that Echad Gagois, Vechad Karfifos, Vechad Chatzeros, rooftops, courtyards, and Karfifos are these storage areas which are classified as non-residential areas that are not a person's private home. So a Kli that was Shavsa B'Soicham, the Kli that was present in these areas at the onset of Shabbos, has been classified as a non-residential item, at least for this Shabbos, and therefore there's no concern transferring it from one place to the other within all these non-residential areas, because it wasn't designated for a person's private use. It wasn't sitting in a person's private, intimate domain. It wasn't in his home. And therefore, it's not as though you're taking something from Reuven's domain and putting it into Shimon's domain, because it wasn't really connected to him on a deep personal level. So this is the sheet of Reb Shimon. So the Gemara tells us that's the pshat in this story. They forgot to bring the knife. They brought it on Shabbos through the rooftops, through the courtyards. Shaloi b'rtzon Reb Lezer, not in accordance with the Shita of Reb Lezer, who allows even through Rosh Hashanah. Rather, as the Gemara concluded, it was b'rtzon Reb Shimon, who allows, even for non-mitzvah purposes, transferring of items throughout all these non-residential areas, and therefore they were allowed to bring the knife through the courtyards, through the rooftops, without any concern whatsoever. So in summary, regarding bringing a knife on Shabbos, how could he do that? According to Rabbi Lezer, even through Rosh Hashanah, according to Chachamim, only through Rosh Hashanah, which has an erev, a proper erev done to it. According to Reb Shimon, he agrees in concept with Chachamim. However, he holds that generally speaking, all these non-residential areas, Gagois, the Chatzeris, and Kafivas, don't require an erev. So certainly there's no reason to hesitate from transferring a knife throughout all these areas, even on Shabbos. Continues the Gemara, Boyiminei Reb Zera, Reb Asi. So you ask Reb Asi the following question. Mavoi, Shaloi Nishtatfa. So we know that this Mavoi is this alleyway in which the people who live in the Chatzeris, they access it to go to the Shusarabim. Now, as we learned, a Mavoi requires a shituf, a partnership to be enacted between all the fellows of the Chatzeris to allow transferring something from the courtyards to the Mavoi. Now there's one more thing that the Mavoi needs. Aside from the shituf, it also needs a physical adjustment done to it, which is called lechi or koira, as we learned earlier, in order to call attention to its separateness from Rosh Hashanah. There's a concern that if we allow carrying throughout this alleyway, perhaps a person will think, carry here, carry Rosh Hashanah. He won't differentiate. He won't realize that the Mavoi is actually Rosh Hashanah because it's fully enclosed, almost fully enclosed. It's surrounded with 3 mechitzes. So in Torah, it's Rosh Hashanah. So to prevent confusion, the Chacham said that one can only carry throughout a Mavoi if you go ahead and erect either a lechi, a side post at the entranceway to Rosh Hashanah. So at the entranceway to the Mavoi, you must make that side post or a cutter, which is a crossbeam, to separate the two areas to call attention to the fact that this is a Rosh Hashanah, and that's why you can carry there. So once again, a proper Mavoi is a Mavoi that has, number one, a physical adjustment, the lechi or the kaira. In addition to the shituf, the partnership, the merged ownership between all the fellows that live in the chatzir. Says the Gemara, what about the following case? Boyiminei Reb Zera Reb Asi. Mavoi shaloi nishtatfa bo. So Mavoi has a lechi, has a kaira, so it has that physical adjustment done to it, but they did not make a shituf. The people living in the Chatzeris did not combine their ownership. So they certainly cannot go ahead and transfer from the Chatzah to the Mavoi. That's certainly not allowed. The question is, Ma'u l'taltal b'kulei. Can one go ahead and transfer throughout this Mavoi? So we have a Kli that was sitting in this Mavoi at the beginning of Shabbos. It wasn't in the Chatzah, so it doesn't need to be transferred into the Mavoi. It's already present in the Mavoi. The question is, can one go ahead and move around this Kli throughout the Mavoi? Ma'u l'taltal b'kulei. Mi amrin, do we say k'chatzar? Let's equate it to a chatzar. K'chatzar dummy. It's equated to a chatzar. Ma chatzar, just as a chatzar. Afagav le'irvu, even though they did not make an erev. So if the people living in the chatzar neglected to form an erev before Shabbos, so that prevents them from transferring from their homes to the courtyard. But certainly, there's nothing to prevent them from carrying throughout the chatzar an object which was present in the chatzar at the onset of Shabbos. So just like the chatzar shalai afagad lo irvu mutal talta b'kuloi, one may transfer throughout the entire chatzar. Hainami. Likewise, when it comes to the Mavoi, afagad lo nishtatfa, even though they did not perform a shit of Mavoyis here, so although they're not allowed to transfer from the chatzar to the Mavoi, that's considered to be a transfer of domains, a change of reshuyos. But something which is present in the Mavoi itself, which is connected, which is identified with the Mavoi itself, mutal talta b'kuloi, one certainly can go ahead and transfer this object throughout the Mavoi. It's not a karmelis. It's not considered to be an unfenced area which the Chachamim prohibited, limited the carrying only within 4 amas. There's no reason to limit the freedom here. Oy dilma. On the other side of the coin, perhaps, loy dilma the chatzar. You can't equate it to a chatzar. Why? The chatzar is leidal mechitzes. A chatzar has 4 proper mechitzes, partitions, which are enclosing it. It's considered to be a proper sayachet. So even though it's lacking the erev, so what? Hi, Leslie, Dal Mechitzes, in contrast to the Mavi, which does not feature 4 full partitions surrounding it. Meaning that it really only has 3 Mechitzes, and the 4th one is wide open, except there's a Lechi or a Kaira situated there, which are considered like they're completing the enclosure. So Midrabanan, they require the physical adjustment, the physical addition to be added to properly enclose the Mavi. Now, the Lech and the Kaira are meant to call attention to its separateness, to call attention to the fact that the Mavi is not Rosh Hashanah. We view it as it's fully enclosed, it's not Rosh Hashanah, it's fully surrounded by Mechitzes. Now, this is far to say that this allowance only applies, meaning the fact that the Chachamim consider the Lechi, which is really a very flimsy type of Mechitza, just a small side post, or the Kaira, they consider that to be like a Mechitza. That's only because there's traffic in the Mavi. There are people using the Mavi. It's visible, it's public, it's a public demonstration of the separateness of the Mavi from Rosh Hashanah. But in this case, where the people living in the Chatzeres are precluded and prevented from transferring into this Mavi because they didn't do a Shituf Mevois, yeah? They can't really properly use the Mavi. So perhaps the fact that there is so much less use of the Mavi, so much less traffic present on Shabbos, the Chacham will not regard the Lechi as significant enough because it's not visible, it's not a public demonstration, there's hardly anybody there to see it. So perhaps they will ignore it, they will negate it, they won't consider it like a Mechitza. So this Mavi will be treated as if it's missing the Lechi V'Kaira. Therefore, one may not carry throughout the Mavi. So that's the distinction between a Mavi, the difference between a Mavi and a Chatzar. A Chatzar is fully enclosed. There's no reason to prohibit carrying, as opposed to the Mavi, which doesn't really have 4 Mechitzes, only has that flimsy Lechi or Kaira. But perhaps that only works when there are people present, as opposed to this Mavi, which is not going to be commonly used this Shabbos. Inami, alternatively, there's another reason that Mavi is inferior to Chatzar. Chatzar is like the urine. A Chatzar is commonly used. It's right outside the homes. It's a commonly used area. So that's different than a Mavi. High, less like the urine. This Mavi doesn't really have much traffic going through it. So perhaps, since there's a very low level of traffic coming through here, a very small flow of people here, because again, this is not a convenient area this Shabbos because there was no shitav done to it. So perhaps the Chacham will treat it like a Carmelis. A Carmelis is like a field, like an unfenced area. Perhaps it will not have a din of Shusayachid, because just as a Carmelis is a place which is not frequented by much people, likewise, this Mavi is not going to be frequented by many people, certainly during this Shabbos, because there is no shituf being done here. So perhaps, as a result of lack of shituf, this sufficient Mavi does not allow carrying throughout the Mavi at all. Shasik, so he remained silent. Once again, this was who Rav Zera asking Rav Asi, can one carry throughout a deficient Mavi? So he remained silent. He didn't respond to him. Apparently he didn't know the answer, whether or not one may carry in a Mavi. Says the Gemara Zimnan, there was another time that Rav Zera encountered Rav Asi, the Yosef Akama. He was sitting and saying the following story. And the name of Rav Shlokish. Omar Yosef Akama, Omar Rav Shimon Lakish Mishum, in the name of Yehuda Nasir. Pam Achaz Shachachu. So there was once a time, this was Rav Yehuda Nasi saying, there was once a time that they forgot to bring the knife. Shachachu v'lo yiviu Izmel me'erev Shabbos, they forgot to bring the Mila knife. V'viu b'Shabbos, and they brought it on Shabbos. V'hoya adavar koshel chachamim. Now the chachamim that were there, or that heard about it, it was very difficult for them to swallow this. Why? How did they disregard the sheet of chachamim who don't allow b'mechal Shabbos in this context? How could they disregard the chachamim and follow Rabbi Lezer? Chada, number one, the Rabbi Lezer Shamutiyu. Rabbi Lezer was excommunicated. This is a story related in the Gemara elsewhere, because he didn't yield to the view of the majority. There's another pshat that Shamuti means he was from the Talmidim of Beis Shammai. Shamuti is connected to Shammai, and generally the halacha doesn't follow the shita of Beis Shammai. So how can they follow this opinion? Va'oid, in addition, Yachad v'Rab Malach Kerab. When there's an individual who is disputing a Rabbim, many, we follow the Rabbim, the majority. So how could they follow the shita of Rabbi Lezer? And the continuation is as follows. V'Omar B'Isha. So B'Isha responded to the Chachamim, who found it very difficult. He told them, look, it wasn't as bad as he thought. She'ila says Rabbi Yehuda HaGoizer. I actually inquired with Rabbi Yehuda HaGoizer, the cutter. He was a male. V'Amar li, and he related to me that the actual facts of that incident was as follows. It wasn't being transferred through Rosh Hashanah, rather the knife was in a mavi, which was lacking the shitav, so it was a somewhat deficient mavi. They simply transferred the knife from one side of the mavi to the other. It never went through Rosh Hashanah. There's no reason for concern. So this was the end of the story, which Rav Asi, was sitting and saying over this whole story, beginning from the Rish Lakish with Rav Nasi, and then Rav Isha's explanation. Now, Rav Zera, overhearing this halacha, this whole incident, with the conclusion that it was merely being carried through a mavi without a shitav, apparently, this is mutter. Amar lei. So Rav Zera, he confronted Rav Asi, he says, Svili lamar, do you hold mavi shlanishtatva by mutal talta b'kulai? Do you hold that a mavi, which is lacking shitav, one is allowed to transfer throughout the whole mavi, as you had just related to me? Amar lei in. So he responded, yes, certainly. Amar lei, so Rav Zera asked him, there was a different time that I asked you this very question, and you hadn't responded to me. You hadn't responded to me in this manner. Dilma, perhaps, agav shitvach, on account of your flow, meaning through the flow of your reviewing that story, that halacha, in the name of Shem Lakish, roit loch gemarach. Your the Gemara, meaning the end of the story, the teaching that you had heard, meaning the explanation of Rabbi Oisha, was recalled to you. Amar Lacey said, yes, exactly, that's exactly what happened. Agav shitfa, through the flow of remembering, of repeating this, the halacha rehita ligmari, the teaching that I had forgotten became recalled to me, and therefore, indeed, that is the halacha one may transfer throughout this type of mavi. Itmar, we learned Amar Rav Zera, Amar Rav, mavi shlein shtatfamai. So this deficient mavi which lacks shitav, ein matalton mai, ela b'dalat ames. One can only transfer within 4 ames. We regard it like a carmelist. Amar Abai, ha milsa. This halacha, Amar Rav Zera said over. V'lei pirsha, but he didn't properly explain it. Ad asa, until Rabba Baravo came, upirsha, and he explained it. The Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Ravo, Amar Rav, so he said the name of Rav as follows. Mavi shlein shtatvaboy, a mavi which is lacking shitav, so this is efficient mavi, irvu chatzeres in batim. So he said it depends, meaning that what Rav Zera told us in the name of Rav, that a mavi which is deficient, which doesn't have shitav, one may not carry within it. It depends on the circumstance. Not all cases will be us. Mavi shlein shtatvaboy, irvu chatzeres in batim. It depends. If the chatzeres had enacted their erev with the batim, meaning there was an erev chatzeres amongst the homeowners of the chatzer, in this case, indeed, one may not be metalta in the mavi, only within 4 amas. So there's no allowance for free carrying. However, lo irvu chatzeres in batim, but if there was no erev chatzeres done inside the courtyards, mutal taltal b'kuloi, one indeed is allowed to be metaltal throughout the entire mavi. Now, how exactly are these 2 concepts related to each other? We will see in the upcoming Gemara, which concludes with a very clear explanation for the connection between these 2 things. Perhaps it would be wise to leave it for the next year, because it's a little bit complicated. But in any case, that was the conclusion here, that the limitation of carrying in this deficient mavi only pertains to certain situations. It's time for a brief review of today's daf. We began with the mitzvah of Mila, which is Daf Yomi Shabbos. Rabbi Kiva says strictly only the Mila itself, which cannot be done before Shabbos, but not the preparations. Rabbi Lezer maintains even the preparations, such as bringing the kli or making the kli, the Mila knife, can be done on Shabbos. He says, well, when you bring that kli through Shus Rabim, you must bring it megula, revealed, and the Gemara tells us on account of chivuve mitzvah, to express one's love and dearness for the mitzvah, that look, he's even willing to be Mechal Shabbos for the mitzvah of Mila. The Gemara tells us that in a Shasa Sakana, certainly don't risk your life, don't leave it exposed, cover it up, but do it in front of Adam, who will pass the word on, and this by doing so he reverts and deflects any possible suspicion that perhaps he's carrying something inappropriate. The Gemara tells us all mitzvahs that Klal Yisrael accepted upon some besimcha, they still do it besimcha, like bris milah, as opposed to arayis, which is accepted biktata. The Gemara says mitzvahs they were moises nefesh on, like avodah zarah and milah, are still firm in our hands as opposed to tefillin, which is still somewhat weak in our hands. The Gemara says regarding bringing a knife through Rishus Harabim, that is allowed contra Blezer. Contra Chachamim, it must be through Rishus Hayachid that has a proper eruv. Contra Pshimon, one can transfer through courtyards, rooftops, karfi storage areas, even without an eruv, because according to him, there's no need for an eruv when it comes to these areas, when it comes to transferring a chayfetz, which was present in one of these non-residential areas at the onset of Shabbos. The Gemara concluded with a story which appears to be telling us that one may transfer throughout an entire mavi, which has a lechi occur, so it has those physical adjustments, but it's lacking the shituf. Nevertheless, one may carry throughout the mavi. The Gemara concluded, well, it depends on the situation, as we'll see in the upcoming daf.